My name is Shannon Flaherty, and I'm a high school teacher here at Global Learning Charter Public School in New Bedford. I teach high school English, and that includes grades 10, 11, and 12. It's my fourth year here at Global Learning. It's my sixth year teaching high school in total, and all 6 of those years have included teaching 11th grade, the junior class. The 11th grade is a very tough year for a lot of kids. There's a lot of stress coming in from a lot of different angles, and one of the big stressors is applying to college, getting into college, and beginning that whole process, which they do need to begin in junior year so that they're all set for senior year, not waiting till the last minute. So while most of their college application is made up of their transcripts, recommendation letters, and resume or extracurriculars, a crucial piece of their admissions packet is the college essay or the personal narrative. This is a very difficult piece for kids to write. It's different than any of the other kind of writing that they've done. And because of this, I've decided to incorporate it as a unit in my curriculum for all 11th graders. And what's great about this is that students have the chance to really work with it, get feedback on it, and make sure that it's the best version that it can possibly be before they attach it to an application. So I wanted to just kind of walk you through a few things having to do with the personal narrative, and hopefully this can help you in either writing your own if you're a student, or teaching and incorporating this type of unit into your educational plan. So the importance of the personal narrative, like we had said, it is necessary for college acceptance. It is a very interesting style of writing. This is a creative nonfiction. What that means is it's creative in the sense that it does start with a story, and there's a narrative storytelling aspect to it where you can incorporate a lot of figurative language and interesting word choice, but it is nonfiction in that you're telling about yourself and your life, and you're telling the truth. It can be difficult for students to kind of wrap their mind around the expectation of what it is you're looking for from them. It does hit quite a few of the Massachusetts writing standards as well, including the production of writing, the text types and purposes, and the range of writing. The production of writing, they are going to be planning this, brainstorming, revising, editing it, potentially rewriting it, and sometimes even having to try a whole new approach. They have to keep in mind who their audience is. This is different than just writing to your English teacher for a grade, or writing for your own pleasure, or even writing to post online to a global audience. You're specifically writing to college admissions counselors, and keeping that in mind is going to help strengthen the product that you come out with. The text types and purposes: writing narratives using literary techniques, well-chosen details, and well-structured sequence. We are going to talk about a sequence that you actually do use. I like to call it the equation. And the range of writing, that you're writing routinely over extended time frames. For both long and short time frames, I will also discuss how long it should take you to do this unit and the best way to map out your time for efficiency. A couple of do's and don'ts to get you started. Try breaking the process into chunks, giving the kids whole classes to do small chunks and lead them toward even writing their first draft is going to be a lot more helpful for them, and it's going to produce much stronger writing than having them just kind of start drafting right away or do a mini brainstorm and then start writing. This type of writing actually takes a great deal of brainstorming, and without that strong foundation, the product just is not going to be worth actually using for an application. Make sure to offer feedback at each stage. So in those chunks, when you ask a student to brainstorm a specific thing, make sure you're checking in with that student, having them either submit it to you online that you can approve it, or handwrite a journal about it that they can give you, or a face-to-face conference in person. But you want to make sure that they don't get too far ahead in their brainstorm, that they're on the wrong track, and they haven't received any feedback from you, that they need to start over. And by the time they do receive that feedback, that's going to feel discouraging because they've been doing work on it and it's going to seem like it's all for nothing. Make sure to provide both good and bad examples. I prefer to use examples of students that I've had in the past rather than, and of course, take their names off of it for privacy issues, but rather than finding examples on Google, which just never seem to capture exactly what it is I'm trying to show or tell the students. So I suggest right from the get-go, any of the essays that are produced within your first unit that you feel like are really strong or that need a lot of work because they make very common mistakes, it's worth it to make a copy of that, black out the name, and save that in your unit binder for future exemplars. The kids really benefit from actually seeing concrete examples of what it is that you're telling them. The timeline, as I had mentioned in the previous slide, the timeline can shift from extended periods of time where every day you're working on this assignment to short periods of time where you might work on the assignment and then a few days you work on something else and then you revisit it after taking a break. This can be very helpful. Just even as a writer in general, sometimes you hit a writer's block. You can't think of anything else to say, you're not sure where you want to go with it, and it'll feel discouraging to sit there and kind of just stare at the page waiting for something to happen. And so I suggest at some point, maybe even at a few different points, taking a break, going, simultaneously engaging in another unit of study as well, something that's not as writing intensive, maybe something that is more geared toward reading or maybe poetry, something a little bit more relaxed, less intensive. And then when you come back to it, again, it isn't as much of a mountain to climb. I also suggest making it a class grade. That's because there are some students that are just grade driven. And even if, this is for the college essay, they plan on going to college. If it's not a grade, they're going to say that they're going to deal with it later. They're going to say that they have time. I'm not applying for colleges for another year until the fall semester of my senior year. I can put it off and I'll just write anything to get my teacher off my back. If they know that you're grading it against a rubric, then they're more likely to put the effort in. This also helps with students who are planning on going directly into the workforce, going into the military, not going to college or going to a community college where they don't need a college essay in order to apply. Making it a grade, make sure that all students are taking part in this. And it's great for all the kids to have this in their arsenal, in their portfolio of writing, that if they were to ever need it, it's there. And so it also takes the stress off you of having two separate groups of people who are doing the college essay and then people who aren't. And what if they change their mind by their senior year? Now they're going to be asking you for help, but you do that in junior year. So time is up on it. It makes it a lot easier to have everyone do it at once and to make it an assessment grade. A few things to just be careful of. Be careful of putting students' ideas down without offering suggestions. This can be difficult because it could come across as you're being insensitive to the topic at hand. They could be picking very personal matters, and sometimes personal matters make for very weak college essay topics. They might show something more negative than positive, or it doesn't do what they think that it's going to do for the college admissions counselor and show about themselves what they think it's showing about them. And they can't really see it because they're too close to the topic. Be careful when you're telling them that it's not a good subject. You don't just want to shoot it down and say, no, you have to hit the drawing board and think of something else. They're going to be discouraged and they may be offended. And you don't want to shut them off to the process. So before doing that, at each stage when you are giving feedback, consider that if you're giving criticism or any kind of negative feedback, what is your suggestion for them to help guide them in the right direction? And the last thing to be careful of is peer editing and peer reviewing. I highly suggest that you don't go there. Again, it could be very sensitive and personal, true material that they're talking about their life, and they don't want their friends or their classmates to read it. Even if you take the names off and show the examples, a lot of times they can guess of whose it is. So that is why it's so important to make sure that you are giving sufficient feedback and that you're using exemplars from former students that your current students most likely wouldn't be able to recognize their writing. Because you shouldn't be peer editing, that means that it puts a lot of weight on the teacher's shoulders to read each stage of it and to give feedback. And again, that goes into taking a break and revisiting. It gives you a chance to catch up as well. When they hit the end of the first stage of let's say, brainstorming, make sure that you're going through and you're giving feedback for each student before you give them the okay to move on to the next stage. Okay, so the actual writing. The writing process includes brainstorming, reviewing the equation of what the structure of their essay actually looks like, reading exemplars with a checklist or a rubric, and then beginning their draft. So when they begin brainstorming, they need to choose an attribute about themselves. And I usually give them a pretty extensive list of attributes, and it needs to be positive. It needs to be something that is true, that they genuinely believe about themselves. And sometimes you have to talk kids into it because they're going to say that they have nothing good about themselves and they don't believe any of it. And that's where, you kind of use your relationship with them to offer a few suggestions of words that you do think adequately describe them. Some of these things, these words, some examples: that they are authentic, that they're a good communicator, that they're creative and curious, that they're dedicated or determined, and so on and so forth. Be careful that the attribute isn't odd or unrelated to getting into college or proving a positive about yourself when it comes to working in a new environment, being a mature college student, getting your work done, working well with others, things like that. For example, being punctual. That is a positive thing. It's great when people are on time, but it would make for an odd topic for a college essay that you're asking them to admit you to their college based on the fact that you're always on time. So the list of attributes you give them may include a few kind of odd or irregular type of descriptive words. Be on the lookout for that. This is one of the stages that I definitely approve. Once they decide what attribute they really want to show to the college admissions counselor, what do they want to prove to them, I need to okay that before they move on to the next stage. The next stage is learning the equation or the structure of what the college essay looks like. And if you think about each of these 4 parts as like a small paragraph, that would make up the first, the 4 paragraphs, in order that the students will be writing their college essay. They should start with a story from their life. This story should reflect a time that they struggled because they didn't yet have this attribute that they chose. Let's say a leader, that they feel that they're a leader. That's a positive thing. They could tell a story about a time in their life where they didn't take a leadership role and it had a negative effect. It could be a time in their life where they did take a leadership role and it had a positive effect. Maybe it's a time where they saw somebody else being a leader and that's what they decided that they then wanted to be a leader as well. It could be an experience where they actually became a leader through that experience of having to go through that, and that's how they acquired the attribute. So they're going to tell that story. That's the creative part of it, where you're using figurative language and narrative skills in order to tell almost short story style, putting your reader right in there, using your five senses, hooking the reader and drawing them in. It's quite narrative. The second part of that is going back to before you had this attribute, before you were a leader. Tell about the struggles that you had in that case, how different your life was then, and in order to prove the third part, now that you've gained this attribute, now that you are a leader, how is your life different now? How is your life positive now? How are you having a positive effect on your community, society, your education, your personal well-being, your growth as a human, whatever the case may be? Now that you are a leader, what's the plus side? And then one of the most important parts is finishing off the college essay with how will this attribute help you in the future? Why should a college admissions counselor care that you're a leader? You need to have students explain the benefits of having this attribute as a college student. This format, I believe, is one of the strongest formats for a college essay. Now, there are prompts that are given by the college board, and we can take a look at some of them. So in 2018 to 19, these don't change very much. Maybe one or two might change in wording, but they're mostly the same. You'll see that one of them is like if they have a background, identity, interest, or talent that's so meaningful that they just like have to share about it. The second one is a lesson that we take from obstacles that we encounter. The third is reflecting on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. The fourth is describing a problem that you've solved. The fifth is an accomplishment. The sixth is a topic, idea, or concept that you find engaging and captivating. And then the seventh is very general. Share an essay on any topic of your choice. So because these are all very general and broad, I like to consider them as kind of jumping off points that if a student is having a very difficult time picking an attribute and can't seem to access the assignment in that way, they could instead choose one of these prompts and see if they could take it in that direction, but still starting in a creative narrative way and then leading toward more of a nonfiction expository, explanatory type of writing style. Great. The third part of the process after brainstorming the attribute and going over the equation is to look at checklists, to look at rubrics, and to look at exemplars. I do have, back out again, sorry. This is a checklist. The following criteria should be met in order to earn full credit. Your essay includes a story. It says something about you, a positive attribute. The attribute you feel you portray in this essay is related to the future and expanded upon in order to link it to life outside of high school. You submitted a draft. You resolved comments. So in order to get a good grade for me, I have to be able to check off all of those boxes. Some explanation about my grading process. And then there's a grading rubric. I have the kids fill this rubric out when they're looking at exemplars, when they're looking at ones that need improvement, when they are rereading their own, and when I'm reading theirs, I also fill it out. This is pretty close to what the college admissions counselors use in order to score an essay. We have the idea, the writer successfully presents the topic in a novel or unique way. It includes excellent and specific concrete detail and insightful commentary. So there's the narrative style of it as well. The writing has a compelling and logical flow of ideas. The story of how, what you are right now, how you were before, during, and then into the future is a very logical organization style. Topic sentences and transitions. This comes in when it's time for revisions and edits, that your paragraphs have focus, topic sentences, that seamless transitions, that the description is good, that you're writing consistently and effectively. You show rather than tell. Again, back to the story elements, that you're using your five senses to make your reader feel like they're really there in the story with you rather than just explaining it to them. That you have a voice, that the writing reveals your unique personality and your view of the world. I often tell kids that when they're drafting, to write like they talk to start with. I can always help them sound more academic. I can always help them revise their writing to be a bit more professional. But you'll be surprised at some of the words and turns of phrases that the students come up with that they use in their daily life that actually gives a lot of kind of style and a lot of voice to their writing, and it makes it very unique to them. It makes it memorable. One of the examples I always give is that being a near Boston girl, I use the word wicked a lot. And so using that word in my essay would stand me out from other people who don't live around here and don't use the word wicked to mean awesome or extremely. And so things like that. Of course, you don't want to use inappropriate slang, and you don't want to use kind of like terrible grammar that's going to be confusing and difficult to read. So there's a fine line that students definitely need your help with. Word choice, that you're using words that are striking and fresh, but also natural, varied, and vivid. It's very important that students understand that they should not be looking up synonyms for every single word in their essay in order to try to sound as smart as possible. Admissions counselors are going to see right through that, just like as an educator, you can see right through it. This needs to be authentic. It's fine every now and then to look for a replacement word because you can't think of something stronger and you don't like the word that you've chosen, but you need to make sure that it really reads true to you and it doesn't sound like you're putting on a front. Grammar usage and sentence fluency, of course, grammar needs to be 100%. You have plenty of time to edit and revise this. There should be 0 errors at the end of it, and spelling and punctuation. Be sure that when you are revising and giving them feedback on things like on their draft, you're not, and this is true for any writing assignment, you're not correcting or having them correct their grammar and their sentence punctuation and their spelling before revising for structure and for content of what they're actually including. There's no point in editing a paragraph to add commas or fix the wording of something if you might just end up deleting that whole sentence. Make sure that your efforts make sense and that you're going in the right order. Some of the examples that I have, this is an example of a brainstorming sheet that I gave out. This part here, and I've highlighted a few words that are positive and would, be good, strong words to use, strong attributes to write about in a college essay, that you're a problem solver, you have integrity, you're innovative, you're hardworking. Not so much that you're loyal, that's kind of odd. That you're adaptable, that you're held accountable. So I give them this big long list here, and they can choose a word that's not on here, that's totally fine, or they can choose one of these. And then I have them write the word. I actually have them list 3. That way, they might think that they have one that is like the best one. But if they give you 3, you can help them pick the strongest of the 3 and the one that makes the most sense without you having to then suggest one on your own and think up one on your own. So have them think of more than one. For each one of these, how did you come to possess this attribute? What in your life molded you or changed you in order for you to gain this positive quality? How did you become a leader? How did you become adaptable? How did you become strong? Then choose one of the above. So this is where you may have them check in and say, I want you to brainstorm, do parts 1 and 2. Brainstorm 3 attributes and tell me how you came to possess those attributes. Then check in. Now let's pick one together of which one is strongest of how you came to be the way that you did and it's a positive attribute. Great. Now let's start writing that story, that specific time where you experienced, witnessed, encountered something that led to the attainment of this attribute. This is where they start writing that narrative style. Here's an example. If your attribute is that you're kind, you might have learned how to be kind by being an older sibling, and you have a lot of young kids in your family, so you learned how to be nice because you have a lot of children around you. The story might begin, when I was 9 years old, my sister and I decided to climb the highest tree that we could find. I'm not just stating, I'm a kind person because I have a lot of siblings. That's boring. That doesn't hook me in. The reader is not gonna be interested in that. Instead, I'm gonna hook you with the beginning of an actual story of a memory and get you interested to find out more. Some examples. This narrative, as you can see, it's very creative. I touched the wet paint as my hands created a blurred smudge. Almost poetic, really. I tried wiping the paint off and accidentally rubbed it on my glasses. I put on my glasses blinded by the bright colors. I was looking at myself. I was looking at New Bedford. I am New Bedford. This person chose to take a very creative approach at it, which came out wonderfully, I think. This second one, managing to break free from my mother's grasp, I charged. With arms flailing and chubby legs fluttering beneath me, I was the ferocious 2-year-old rampaging through Costco on a Saturday morning. Already funny. Great visuals, great word choice, definitely putting me, right in the story. And I'm not really sure where it's going to go, but as a reader, I'm interested. And then this one is an example of one that needs work. And it begins, one significant experience I had when I camped out in the wilderness with my dad for 2 weeks last summer. First of all, that's a fragment sentence. Second of all, it reads like you're answering a question, like you're responding to a prompt. You're not putting me in the story like a narrative like the other ones, where you just start describing the camping with your father. Instead, this writer is explaining it and telling it, not showing it. That's an example of something that you need to be careful of. So, after the checklists, the conferencing, once the students start fully drafting using that equation, I suggest having them write on a Google Doc. It's easy for you to comment and make suggestions on the Google Doc, even live, while the kids are working on their computers. If you're one-to-one and everybody has a laptop, that would be key. Or if you're working in a computer lab of some sort, if you can be on their document while they're on their document, that's great. You can open a folder and you can share that folder with students so that all of their docs will be in one place by class. Use exit tickets at the end of classes to gauge where your students are having trouble, what they may need help with, and questions that they may have, that when you address an entire class and ask, is anybody lost? Does anybody need help? Oftentimes no one raises their hand, but there's usually a few who really do need help. They just don't want to say it in front of everybody else. The exit ticket gives them a chance to actually reflect on where they may need you without having to vocalize it. Make sure that you are revising first for content, that the actual information that they are writing about is sound and approved and that you agree. Next, for organization, are they talking about it in the right order? Did they start with the story and then the before and the now and the after? Then once the content and the organization is good and they're fully approved, now you're editing for grammatical structure, sentence structure, mechanics, spelling, and that type of thing to really perfect it. We had talked about no peer feedback before. their personal topics. Students are shy about their work. They could really shut off from any feedback. They will begin judging themselves against their peers as well. They may think like, oh, I'm doing a pretty good job with mine, and then they read the person next to theirs and it may be really strong and really great. Now they are not confident in theirs and they don't want to work on theirs anymore. They don't think it's good. Also, they could be giving insufficient or incorrect feedback. A lot of times when we have kids peer edit each other's writing, we're also teaching them how to edit, how to give feedback on a piece of writing. This is not the type of assignment where students should be kind of learning that skill. They could say, oh, I think you should change this or do this instead. And they may be completely wrong. So as the teacher, you really need to take that role. Make sure you're setting aside time to give sufficient feedback. Here are some exemplars we actually just looked at, the strong ones and the needs work. And there was one last thing for grading and evaluating. This is actually, I think, oh yes, we looked at this. This is how you also can grade their essay if you'd like. You can use this that we looked at before. I like to use this one for feedback. And if with these boxes, if I can check off every single one of these, your score will be 100. For every box that cannot be checked off, 5% will be deducted. For example, if you didn't submit the draft in time, you can receive a 95. If you didn't receive a draft and you didn't receive feedback from me because you put the draft in too late, that I couldn't get you feedback, now you're down to 90%. And so on and so forth. I find that I'm not trying to grade this harshly, and I'm not trying to grade it based on, basically two students could both receive 100% credit, and one essay is going to be a lot stronger than the other essay. This is, again, remember your purpose for writing this. This is to help them to get into college. It needs to be the strongest that they can write. And it needs to be authentic. It needs to be coming from them. So be careful with your grade book that you're not grading on kind of like content or interest, that if it's just not like the best essay and you're kind of like, I've seen a lot better, that doesn't necessarily mean that it should receive a lower grade. If the student did everything that you asked, got it in on time and tried their very best, they should receive full credit for it.